Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome on a pretty sweltering day. Some of you will have heard Charles's attempt at being a DJ with playing the Beatles track "Can't Buy You Love," which really links into the theme of our discussion group today, which is about values and prosperity, thinking about the connections between them, and I guess whether people are prepared to make trade-offs between their values in their pursuit of economic success. I don't think those two aspects of life necessarily need to be mutually exclusive, but for a lot of us, as we pursue our careers, it's quite common to find that we drift away from what some of our core values are. The result, I'm afraid, probably of a inherent greed in human beings, if you consider what happened in the Industrial Revolution, not only in this country, but the industrial revolutions that happened across the world. The format of today is a standard format. I'm doing an introduction, then I'll be handing you over to Alan. And we're very, very lucky today to have three speakers that Alan will introduce, who will be telling us their stories of how they made the balance between their values and the search for prosperity and making changes in their careers. So, and then after that, those speakers will form a panel. Questions will be asked to them, and then there'll be a session at the end where everyone can join in and address set questions that are going to be asked. So, quite a lot to pack in. I suppose my closing thoughts on this are there's a lot of evidence in terms of research studies that there is a link between prosperity and happiness. People talk about there being a plateau effect after you get to a certain point. That's slightly debatable, but I think the challenge for us and the generations going forward is because we live in such a connected world. One of my very best friends grew up and they had very, very little money. And when I talked to him about this, he simply said to me, we didn't realize we were poor because we were happy. I think in today's connected world, that is no longer possible. And so the dynamics of this, I think in relation to a topic for us to discuss around values, is more and more pertinent as people are put under greater pressure. I don't think I've got anything more other than, as I say, to extend a welcome. And if you're not a member of the UK Values Alliance with a paid up subscription, then maybe at the end of this, it'll be something you'll consider. So for now, without further ado, can I pass over to Alan, who's going to introduce the speakers? Thanks.
Thanks very much, Neil. And what I like about the format of this is that we don't have to listen to kind of general speculation about the topic. We're going to hear from three people telling their story, which is always a lot more interesting, I think. So we have John, Shailene, and Nicola in that order. And rather than me try to introduce them, they're going to do that before they tell us their story. So over to you, John.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. Oops, I'll just that so you don't see my lampshade. Yeah, so currently I'm a stress management trainer and also a facilitator and volunteer worker with a meditation organization called the Brahma Kumaris. And I've been connected with them now for over 30 years and probably spend most of my time helping there in different ways, running workshops, editing things and doing different outreach activities. So I'm pleased to be here, and it's through Charles because we've worked together now for quite a long time on joint activities for World Values Day each year. And I consider myself very lucky, really, because I was born after the war and we were like the baby boomers who were given everything. So on one level, money hasn't been that important to me because a lot of things were provided free of charge, including, free university education. So I'm like a throwback to a previous time when house prices were reasonable and et cetera, and had everything that we needed. So I've never really striven for money. Um, and obviously I've needed a certain amount to keep me going. But I think when it comes to prosperity, it's much deeper and much more important to be prosperous on the inside rather than on the outside, if you know what I mean. So, in other words, developing your own personal qualities and values and living a meaningful and purposeful life, which is satisfying. Um, you may get paid for it, and I have got paid for it. When I was prison governor, I got paid, obviously. And I went into that to help people. I think that's been probably the current underlying value. When I say help, I mean empower, uplift, change for the better, because I've always been driven by wanting to make the world a better place. And it's something I can't help, it's just in me, and has caused me challenges at different times. So again, I was fortunate enough to be educated in the 60s and went through that student revolution and that feeling that we could change the world. And it was all, very heady and very exciting. And I studied sociology at Essex University, which was a hotbed of revolution at the time.
Mm.
I studied sociology so I could understand society better. So really everything, has come to me, I'm sure partly because of those values. If I'd had different values, I may have gone into a totally different area of science or economics or whatever. And yeah, so when I finished that, I ended up, I can't believe it happened actually. I ended up as an assistant prison governor. I did that for 10 years and I went into it to change the prison service and make it more humane. It was at a time when they were wanting to make things more open and they were into rehabilitation rather than punishment and containment. So I fitted in perfectly for a while and I helped to set up a new young offenders institution at the time with a very progressive governor. And we had the trainees out working in the community, going to college, all sorts of wonderful things. And it was brilliant. And then things happened, and then you have to move on every so many years. And I ended up in a top security prison, which was very different, the complete opposite. And I think the final crunch came when the governor said two prisoners were murdered on the wing where I worked. And he said, "Have you seen a stiff before?" I didn't even know what he meant by a stiff, but it was a dead body. And he forced me to go and see these bodies as part of my training, which I found very upsetting. And after that, I think I decided I've had enough of this. I want to help people in another way. And I ended up then retraining as a social worker. I had no grant or anything. I had a cash and insurance policy to do it. Had a wife and a couple of kids under school age. So again, you could say I took a chance, but I believe, if you do good, good comes to you, and that's always happened to me. So even though we didn't have much money, everything worked out okay. And then I got a job as a social worker, and that was really good. And then the social work started changing, and I became more of an apologist because of the lack of resources. And I thought, I haven't come into this just to explain to older people that they can't go into home now because there's a long waiting list and we haven't got any luncheon clubs and all the rest of it. So I got very frustrated and decided, I can't do this anymore. And so by chance, in inverted commas, there was an opportunity to take early retirement at the age of 50, which is amazing when I look back on it. And I did that thinking that a small lump sum and a small pension would keep me going. I mean, the kids were at university by this time, and I was a single parent. And of course, the money didn't last very long, so I had to reinvent myself as a stress management trainer, and had to do all the things which I'd never wanted to do in the past, websites, business cards, and everything else. But it has to be said, I earned enough money to finish off paying the mortgage, enough money to survive, but no savings or anything like that. And I did that until COVID, and then COVID seemed to have knocked the edge off it. It's all online now. So I'm not sure how many minutes I've got left, but
You're good, John.
You've got another 4 or 5 minutes, John.
4 or 5 minutes. Okay. So, I've been lucky. I've been able to live the life I've wanted based on my values, and I've had a very rich life. Through the Brahma Kumaris, I've ended up going around different parts of the world. South America, Singapore, sorry, not Hong Kong and Mauritius and different parts of Europe, doing workshops and things like that. I met loads of amazing people, and I've been able to edit books, write a book, all sorts of things which I would never have been able to do if I'd remained as a social worker. So I've always had, I suppose, a drive to do my best in I can, given my limitations, and wanting to make, the world a better place. And for me, it has worked out well. Whether it would today, with all the other circumstances around, the inflation rates, the impossible house prices, paying for everything, like education, that is another matter. But I think unless you live in alignment with your values, it doesn't matter how much money you have, you will not be happy. You can't be, because you're actually undermining your innate spiritual life, if you like. Spiritual can be seen as a bit woozy or whatever the word is, or religious. It's not. We've all got, if you like, we're all programmed to be good because that's our original nature. And if we do anything against our nature, and go against our goodness, then we're going to be unhappy. It's guaranteed. We'll either be stressed, sick, or whatever. So really, for me, values and prosperity, go hand in hand, but I may have a different vision of the world to other people, but that's all really I can say.
Thank you, John. Yeah, it's going to be what a great start, and it's going to be fascinating to see what differences and similarities there are with the experience of the other two speakers. So, Shailene, let's go.
Right. No, thank you. And thank you, John, for your sharing. A lot resonated with me on that. So I'm a happiness coach, speaker, and trainer. And I can prove to you that if you give me £1 million, money won't make you happy. So I'm willing to do that experiment if anyone's willing to give the £1 million. But joking aside, there is a certain amount of money that we do need to live our lives, but it's often less than what we think, and we often don't even think about how much we need, and we just want more and more of the money or the things that money may allude to us, and hence we get on the hedonistic roller coaster of wanting the status and the job and the bigger house and the bigger cars and those kind of things, and can fall into that trap. If we're able to be content with what we have and contribute and give service and value to the world, and be fairly have fair exchange for that, then we're on a good number. And fortunately for me, that roller coaster I've not actually been on per se, of wanting the designer clothes or the latest gadget or the new house or the multiple cars and so forth. So that is from my upbringing from an early age, which I'll share about more in a moment. But we've not had that. But I will share some of the challenges I've had with regards to money and values. So, as I mentioned, I'm a happiness coach, speaker, and trainer. And with Happy Life Habits, we positively impact happiness and well-being levels. And we're a business for good. And I use that purposefully to say we're a business for good, to just help remind myself what we do and why we do it. I do speaking, workshops, training, and retreats. And that's just one aspect of one of my roles. So in addition to being a father and a husband, the happiness coach is one role. Another role I have is being a carer for my mum. She's in her 80s. She's got dementia and Parkinson's, both progressive neurodegenerative diseases, and her physical mobility and cognitive functions have deteriorated. And she's more and more dependent for day to day. So that's one of the other roles I do. And my third role is being a volunteer in community groups and help, provide service there. So those are the three key roles I currently work with. And I should mention that gratitude is my superpower, or one of my superpowers, and that fits very nicely with, as we practice gratitude, we become content with what we have and appreciate what we have, and also that leads to happiness, contentment, humility, and so forth. Some of the values which are important to me are time, and good use and effective use of time. And in reality, let's face it, our life is short, time is short, so we want to be using that as best we can. Connection is another one. Integrity, freedom and choice, service and gratitude. So those are some of the values which have been important to me. And now with looking after my mum, some of the values and virtues which are coming into play are patience, acceptance, empathy, compassion, and service. So the values may have changed in the sense of some coming more to the forefront than others, and also over time, some becoming more clearer that these are the things I want to live by, and these are my values, and living them more purposefully. So those are some of the things there. And I'd like to share some of my personal story. So one of the things that I've shared when we were sharing about this on LinkedIn was how I sold my soul for a cup of coffee. And I'll come on to that and share that, the relevance of that in a moment. So that incident happened about 15 years ago. And it's not one I've shared publicly, partly, I think, through being a bit embarrassed by it. Being embarrassed, fear of judgment, and just so forth of not adhering to my mission and values, and it just those aspects come into play. So it's not something I've shared publicly before, but I will share it today. And part of it also, it's one where I wasn't being who I was, if that makes sense. And I think it'll become clearer as I share more. So that coffee story was one of the contributors to me changing paths from being in technology for the financial services and shifting to becoming a happiness coach in that way. And just to give you some context to my background, so my parents emigrated from Kenya to the UK in the 70s. From an early age, I saw them adapt to a new country, new culture, and the challenges and opportunities that came with those. They were working hard, making progress while still maintaining family duties. So I saw that balance of family and connection and community, as well as to progress and do your best, and not necessarily have the latest gadgets, but live a comfortable life in that way. They embodied a strong work ethic, which they taught through to me. They taught me to do the right things, do things well, to be helpful, and make time for family, community, and connection. And for my teens, I've always been kind of working in some kind of role or another, whether it was Saturday jobs or summer and Easter jobs during that time. So always, looking for opportunities to work, gain some experience, earn some money in that way. And after university, I graduated into a UK economy which was in recession. So it took a little while for me to land my first job. A few friends had landed jobs with IT companies and investment banks. So IT has been my background in that way of education and vocation. And after a few months, I landed a job with a US-based consulting technology firm, and it involved traveling around the world, both in the mainly in the US and in the UK, for projects. And some of these were for weeks at a time. Initially, and sometimes in months. Initially, it was exciting, living in hotels and eating out and so forth. But over time, that novelty wear off, and I realized this lifestyle was not for me. I was not having time for family, for connection, for social, for sports, for community. I didn't have control of my time. So those were some of the things that played during that from there. But also during this time, I was introduced to personal development and also the Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I read the book, did the exercise, and really enjoyed going through that process and learning things from there. And one of the things that I did of the exercises during that time was creating my own personal mission statement. And this was to help me to remember how I want to show up, how I want to be remembered, and how I want to live. And it helped me focus on the things which were important to me, my virtues, and my values. And one line I'd like you to just keep a note of from my personal mission statement, which plays relevance to the content we're sharing today, is act with integrity, truthfulness, and do the right thing. So remember, this is in my 20s, personal mission statement, and this is one of the lines, I've said this is how I want to live my life. So if we fast forward to 2000, went through various job changes. I've ended up working in finance technology for NatWest Markets. So that's one of the bank's investment arms. So I'm working in finance technology as a contractor at that stage. And within a few weeks of starting the job, RBS, Royal Bank of Scotland, announces it's taking over NatWest. And what I saw during that period was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of confusion, a lot of people leaving their jobs by choice or through redundancy, and a lot of change occurring. And as time went by, we had more offices. There was change in management structures, change in leadership teams, and a lot of change occurred during that time. And as RBS grew and grew, it splashed the money on office renovations, sponsorship of huge billboards. You may remember at Heathrow Airport, Terminal 3, big splash across there, Royal Bank of Scotland, RBS, sponsored cricket, sponsored Formula 1, and TV adverts. So it was there, everywhere, putting that name out and doing its way of marketing. In finance technology, we were kept busy in integrating the various systems from the various banks that from RBS and from NatWest to become one integrated system to feed into the bank's ledger, as well as with other acquisitions it did as it grew and grew, integrating those in. And I went from being a contractor to being a permanent employee with the various benefits and security that that offered through that. However, during 2008 and 2010, this is when I had my rocky patch, and this is where I experienced work-related stress and burnout. So my role had progressed from being a developer to a senior developer to a technical team lead, and finally to being a technical project manager. My salary had stayed the same throughout that, but the progression in career in that way had happened. And so the idea is, as you progress through the various ranks and take on more responsibility and deliver more things. Salary rises, title changes, and bonuses is what comes through. So while I was a technical project manager for the first time, I was on a 6 to 8 month project, and that involved taking the bank's Ulster and Northern Ireland businesses and putting them onto the ledger to integrate and migrate those on. So it was a hard deadline. It was lots of people involved, and because of that hard deadline, it involved a lot of work in a short period of time. And for me, it was very much a learning curve where I was doing a role I hadn't done. I was working with systems, some I didn't know, the ins and outs of, so learning to do those. And we were, in hindsight, woefully understaffed on that project. And for some of it, we were doing dress rehearsals on weekends. So we would be working the week, Friday night, getting things ready so that the data could be migrated, working that through on Saturday, and so business could check the numbers and sign off on the Sunday morning, and working that way. But there was a couple of occasions where inevitably there were delays and issues which occurred, which meant that we worked through Saturday night, tried to get the business to sign off on the Sunday on this dress rehearsal, and then to be back in on Monday. So it was a relentless aspect of work, demanding environment, me out of my depth, and in hindsight, I've realized I wasn't the right person for the role. I didn't have the right skill set at the time, and I didn't get the support, training, or guidance to grow into that role with the various changes which had happened. And there was it meant I was taking holidays. My wife and son went overseas to visit family, and I wasn't able to go with them. So all of these things occurring during this time. And it was impacting my health and well-being and performance. So at the time, I didn't, as I mentioned, didn't realize it, but it was stress and burnout that some of it was what I was experiencing then. So as the project progressed, and as we were coming towards the end of the project, and this is 2008, and the financial crisis takes hold, and RBS is bailed out by the government. It's basically broke, doesn't have money, and the ripple effect of that and the other financial companies that were part of all of this, ripples through the economy. And we deliver the project, but it's in light of now the bank has been bailed out. So goodbye salary increases, goodbye bonuses, goodbye pension and share schemes from £12 going down to less than 50p, so 90% of value disappearing. So all of these things disappearing. And some of that was partly what I guess I was working with to be continuing to do the job and undergo, working in that stressful environment. But also some of it was driven from that aspect of to do the right thing, having taken on responsibility and commitment to, deliver those things, to learn and so forth. But at the time, I didn't realize that the challenge was greater than what I could fulfill without support and guidance. And all of this has obviously come through in hindsight. So all of those were, the things that happened. And also at the same time, the bank took over ABN AMRO without doing the due diligence that it should have. So we've merged with another company, we've run out of money, and new leadership is in place. So our structure is changing regularly, new management coming in, people who don't know our my track record or what I'm able to do, what I'm not able to do, and so forth, and no history of the things I have achieved. So all of those things disappearing during this period, and that it was the one aspect of the stress and realizing that I'm working towards all of these, and all of these things are disappearing. So another aspect was power and politics. So whereas power and politics being at play, and I didn't like that, and I didn't like the way people were starting to be treated, and people just giving lip service to some of the messages from the chairman regarding culture and so forth. But coming to the coffee incident, what had happened was another demanding project had occurred, again, stress and long hours and so forth. So over a short period of time of this 2-year period, I'm experiencing these things. And one time I'm going to this coffee shop, I have a loyalty card and it's only got a couple of stamps on there. You need a certain number of stamps to get the free coffee. I, order my coffee, the barista stamps it and he stamps the card fully. And I realized, okay, I can get a free coffee, but I haven't actually, been paid to get that full coffee in that manner. And I knew this and I still went ahead, got the coffee. In my head, I'm thinking I should let them know, pay for it. But with all those things that have happened and making the wrong choice, I chose not to. I walk away and go home, go back to my desk. It's playing on my mind. On the train home, it's playing on my mind. When I get home, it's playing on my mind. And if you remember, my personal mission statement said, do the right thing, integrity, and doing things well. So I'd broken my integrity over a cup of coffee, and I was earning well. So let's not mistake that. In the investment bank, you're still earning well relatively, and I can pay for a cup of coffee. But I chose not to, and I had done these things, and that's when it hit me that who was I becoming? What was I doing? Why was I doing this? And that was another aspect to shifting out of that environment, as well as all the changes that had happened. So I chose to leave that environment and to leave that industry and leave the technological change that was happening. Eventually, RBS said goodbye and gave me redundancy, and I took time out. At that time, I spoke with my wife and said, look, I need some time out to think what will we do next. We've got some savings. Let's work with that. Let me work out what the next chapter is. And so we made those decisions. We lived frugally, as we had done, but comfortably. And with that, I took some time out, explored various things. And one of the things that was important to me was having control of my time and my choices. My parents were getting elderly, so I wanted to be able to take them to hospital appointments without asking anyone else. My son was getting older. I wanted to be able to attend to his school functions without asking for time out. And so all of these things led me to train myself on the things that I enjoyed, which was science of happiness, personal development, and spirituality, and become a happiness coach. So that I've got control on how I use my time, but also more in line with my with my strengths and qualities and virtues, and designed the company to be a business for good from the beginning. And hence now, this is what I show. It's more purpose-driven than profits. I'm able to look after the things which are important to me, live through my strengths, and I do, what I do enjoy. And, each day now I look at the lens of life through energy, work, and love, and have affirmations of qualities and virtues for that. And each day in the morning, I review my full mission statement so as to remember that this is what's important to me. This is how I want to live and show up, and work with that. And, just in finality, real wealth and success is not so much about money, but it's more about, it's much greater than that. And prosperity and wealth is to do with happiness, well-being, service, contribution, and not just the money you have in the bank. So thank you for that, and apologies for running a tad over.
No,
That's okay, Shailene. Thank you very much. And it's one of these situations where, yes, we do have a plan of time, but also there's wiggle room, so we can always make adjustments. So it's been fascinating listening to your story. And what I appreciate is the courage to share something so personal, and also the level of detail from an emotional perspective that you went into. And specifically this point about how, I think sometimes when people like us who believe so strongly in values talk about this area, they kind of imply that those people who don't live their values, there's something wrong with them, or that, you know, they should do a lot better, shouldn't they? But it's the real world, and we're all presented with situations where perhaps, you know, it's not easy to stick to what is important to you, and you've just demonstrated that perfectly. So thank you so much.
Could I just add? Sorry, could I just add one line?
One line, yes.
One line. By having strayed from my values, I found now I've got a stronger commitment to the values which are important to me. So having strayed from it, I'm more committed to my values. So that was my observation from that experience.
Okay, thank you. And Nicola, don't worry, because you've still got your 12 minutes. Off you go.
Thank you very much. Hello, lovely to meet everyone. I'm actually new to this group. So Alan, you might be tapping me up, I reckon, to become a member afterwards. So I set up my own business a couple of years ago. I call myself the leadership coach and people person. And what I might mean by that is I do a kind of bit of a mix of one-to-one coaching. I work with whole of leadership teams, coaching them and helping to develop them, and doing some consultancy around culture and values within organisations. So a bit of a kind of broad church of things that I do, but the thing that I think runs throughout that is I really specifically try to work with purpose-driven businesses. In fact, I've become a bit obsessed by purpose, and I'll come on to a bit more about that in a second. But I try to work with businesses that are trying to do good things, and some of that is not-for-profits and charities, and some of that is businesses that are trying to make money, but they're trying to do that in a way that is more than just the money that they're making. They're trying to make some positive impacts as well. And my route to coming into that role that I now do and setting up my own business was probably as much a shock to me as it was to the employer that I left after 20 years. So previously I'd been at EY, one of the big four professional services firms, and enjoying a very happy and successcwas career. I'd done the classic, I wasn't an accountant, just to qualify, but I was climbing the corporate ladder and enjoying the trappings that came with that. So a very a very comfortable lifestyle, a nice house, but also, going to work was an experience that felt prosperous, both in terms of the building we worked in, the traveling business class when I had to go on business trips, traveling first class, even if I just had to go to Birmingham for the day. And so there was this kind of very prosperous aspect to my career, as well as being very intellectually stimulated and feeling that I was doing some really good, interesting work in learning and development. I became a coach whilst I was at EY. So there's still very much this sense of doing good. And I'd say that kind of my purpose around that was I wanted to help people be the best that they could be. But I won't lie, in the back of my head, a lot of that was connected with being the best they could be, so they could earn the most that they could earn, or possibly even more indoctrinated than that, earn as much as they possibly could for the organisation. When I did leave EY's corporate colours are kind of yellow and grey, and when I did leave EY, quite a few people said to me, "How can you possibly be leaving? Cut your arm and yellow comes out." I was the kind of very much the corporate poster child. And how had I become that? Well, if I go back to before I'd started at EY, I'd grown up in a slightly contrasting lifestyle. So my grandparents' roots are very, very working class, living in a council house. My granddad very much lived ends to, maxing out the any money that he had, but very, very generous with that money too, like ridiculously generous. Would have the sort of person that would have given you the coat off his back. My mum had been quite ambitious and had put herself through accountancy qualifications, and so had been able to afford this lifestyle that was quite contrasting from what I saw my grandparents having. We lost my dad when I was about 7, and that put at risk this quite comfortable lifestyle that we were living. And somehow, and I don't quite know how she managed to do it, but somehow my mum managed to continue to provide, to keep us safe and warm, and still living in a very comfortable house. And so I think going into my career, going into my kind of money earning phase of my life, I very much understood what happened when you didn't have money, but I hadn't necessarily experienced it, and perhaps hadn't experienced, to Neil's point, this sense that you can be happy without money. And so I go into this corporate environment, EY, which, again, some very good people there, but money is at the heart of everything that you're doing when you're working in an environment like that. So that was another kind of dynamic to what happened with my career. And then there's a third part that I think is my backstory, which is ill health. So as a teenager, I'd experienced chronic illness called ME, or chronic fatigue syndrome, and that's been a sort of a reoccurring theme throughout my life. And when you've had ill health, one thing you do know is that having money available really helps. You can buy things that help your lifestyle. So whether that's somebody to come and clean your house when you don't feel well enough to be able to do those mundane tasks yourself, whether that's being able to afford a taxi because you can't necessarily find the energy within yourself to be able to walk to your friends or whatever it is. So I tell you all of those things because I think they are the reason why 20 years at EY feels like it was a blink of an eye, because the whole time I was there, I would never have said my values were being compromised or conflicted or in any way challenged, but until COVID. Something happened, and it's funny that I'm in this room sharing this story, because it wasn't in this exact room. We've just gone into lockdown, and I start to, by this point I'd been promoted to director, so and a global director, which meant the people I was working with were all over the world, and it was kind of one of those be careful what you wish for moments. It's the thing I thought I'd been progressing to. It's the thing that I thought that once I'd got this promotion to director, I would feel on top of the world. And I didn't. I just felt flat. And that had happened fairly soon before the COVID lockdown. We then go into COVID lockdown, and I'm speaking with my identical twin sister, who happens to be a CEO of a charity, and she's sharing with me like actual life and death stuff, decisions that she is making. She's CEO of a charity that looks after people with Alzheimer's and dementia. So at that point, we knew so little about COVID. She's asking herself, can I still send my staff into these people's homes, and all of those horrific things. And you know what I was thinking at that time? I was thinking, should I put 5 slides or 8 slides in the presentation that I've got to prepare for our global leadership? And I won't swear, but it just suddenly dawned on me what I was doing felt like a total load of BS. And I asked myself some really challenging questions at that point. But one of those questions was, can I manage without the financial security? For me, it's never been about financial success. I've never wanted to get richer and richer and richer, but I have enjoyed the knowledge that that we've got financial security as a family. The other questions I asked myself, though, was how will I feel if I'm still worrying about whether or not 8 slides or 5 slides in 15 years' time, in 10 years' time? And one of the things I realized is I couldn't even really bear the thought of still being asking myself those questions within 6 months' time. So I started to think about, well, if not this, if my time has come at EY, what would I go to do? And I realized really quickly it wasn't about going to another organization. It wasn't about going and just experimenting somewhere else. It was about this kind of entrepreneurial glint that I think I'd perhaps had in my eye for a while. So I started to make plans to do that, but the main thing I had to do was get myself brave enough for that value around financial security to start to just become a bit quieter and just let that value perhaps take some risks. And one of the ways I did that was I started to ask myself about some of my other values. And one of the ones that really came to the fore at that point was about being self. And I realized that in the compromises I'd made for this financial security and flexibility as well, I had compromised way too much on the value around being self. So as I start to set up my own business, it really becomes about how can this business that I set up be something that people want to buy, because remember, financial security is still something that's quite important to me, but I really wanted it to be a service, something that I was doing for people, but that also made me feel good, made me feel like I was truly being myself, and allowed some of those other values, the generosity value that I mentioned with my granddad, that's in my blood too. And even now, the way that I work, some might describe it a little bit uncommercial, but particularly when I work with charities, they'll always get a bit extra from me because that's just hugely important to me. There's probably not much other things to say, but I wouldn't mind just sharing one thing that I noted down, because the impact of other people perhaps hasn't come up so much through other stories just yet. And I know I've mentioned my granddad already, but one of the people that helped me to get brave enough to relinquish that perhaps over-indexing I'd had on my financial security value was my old boss, who's now become a brilliant friend of mine. She asked me when she first became my boss, probably about a year into that role that I didn't particularly enjoy, because it basically meant putting 5 or 8 slides together on a daily basis. She asked me, what makes you sing, what makes you dream, and what makes you cry? And that was our first ever conversation we had together. And I just ended up spilling absolutely everything to her and telling her about this plan. It wasn't even a plan. I mean, that would be massively flattering what it was at that point. I shared everything with her, and she left me with a comment that I still have in my head every single day, and I think is particularly relevant to this conversation, which is, when you do the right thing, the money will follow.
Could have been written by Paul McCartney or somebody like that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nicola. So differences and similarities. One thing that's come through for me is how, sometimes we talk about how we can choose our values and then we can be aligned with them. But what that kind of ignores is the influence that your family has on you, the environment within which you exist has on you, the people that are around you have on you, health has on you. So there are a lot of external influences that also have an impact. So that's come through quite strongly. So let's move on to the panel questions then. And imagine that you're now, so this is our guest speakers. Imagine that you are now with your 18-year-old self, and you've got like 30 seconds to give them a 1 sentence or 2 of advice. So what would you tell them, your 18-year-old self, based on the experience that you've had so far? And I'm not going to pick on anybody. Whoever feels ready first, please share.
Shall I go first? Yeah. So I think with this one, it's 5 bullets I'd like to share. So one is be clear of your end game, live through your strengths and contribute, together and to the greater good, and stay happy. Try out things, observe the results, correct, commit as required. Treat people fairly and well. Avoid getting stuck in the rat race, the head on a stick roller coaster. Know how much is enough for you, and yeah, that's what I'll leave it at that. And after everyone else shared, if there's a moment, I'll share a 2-minute story.
Okay, we might have time for that towards the end. John or Nicola, what about you? Your 18-year-old self, what advice would you give?
I can go. I've just got two things. So the first one is that what your head tells you and your heart tell you matters, and often it is a balance between the two things. And the second one is never apologize for who you are.
Oh, I like that one. And John?
I think that be true to yourself, and that means you've got to know yourself. So you have to spend a bit of time reflecting on what makes you happy, a bit like the dancing and or the dreaming and the singing and things like that. And follow your heart and have the faith that everything will work out all right. Yes.
Thank you. And I'm just thinking, I'm trying to remember when I was 18 and how I would have felt if somebody gave me that advice. I suppose the bit that I would add to what you've all suggested is that it's not so easy for an 18-year-old to understand some of that stuff because they just don't have the benefit of the experience that you've subsequently gained. So John, I think that piece about understanding yourself is maybe the first step that they would take before they can start to take on board the advice that the other guys have suggested. Now, for the other people that are here, what you've heard so far, please feel free to put any comments in the chat or any questions you've got, and Charles will draw on those for the general session that we're going to come to after this final question to the panel members. And that is an insight into your best hopes for the future. So what does that look like for you? What are your best hopes for your personal future?
Happy to go again. So this was interesting. And for me, I think it boils down to keep doing, serving and contributing till the body and mind doesn't let me. Keep improving, growing and getting better. And hopefully when the time to die occurs, to die with no regrets.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can't really add much to that, really. To be happy and healthy until the end, and always, serving in some way or another. So it's not just about me, but it's about the people around me, and hopefully making, a positive contribution to the world in some way or another.
Thanks, John.
The end, yeah.
Nicola.
Mine probably goes back to that great advice that I told you that my boss gave me about this kind of do the right thing and the money will follow. Because I mean, I'm still, I think at best I'm still 20 years or so away from any kind of retirement, and so there is a practicality of life. I do need to earn some money, but I like to think that I can do that working with businesses that are doing good things for society, or charities that are doing good things for society. I can use my generosity value to kind of give that little bit extra to help them in any way I can. And almost so my hope for the future is that I can live a professional life that makes me feel good personally about who I am and how I'm leading that life. And I know I probably should be able to kind of give something that's a bit more personal and a bit separate, but honestly, I feel like, especially probably because I'm only 2 years into sort of my entrepreneurial journey, I feel like they're so blended right now that it's massively important. It's kind of almost more important to me that I get personally who I want to be and that congruence with who I am into my professional life, than that is important that I get that balance and being able to kind of separate the professional life from the personal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the case much more now than it was, say, 20 years ago, when our personal and work or professional lives were more separated than they are. So yeah, completely understand that, Nicola. Could I invite everybody that's here to just come off mute, please? Chris, you going to come off mute? Joy? Rosemary? And just join with me in recognizing the three speakers that we've had. Thank you so much for bringing such personal stories, and let's do a round of applause, even though we're on Zoom. Over to you, Charles.
Yeah, that's great. Shall I don't know, I'll get back to if I can just remove the spotlights from you all, just at least for the time being. And then we can move on. Right, this is one by one, a laborious process. Yeah, so what I'd like to do, just while we've got a few minutes left, is really try and the idea is to open up the conversation to everyone. Before doing that, maybe just to start the ball rolling, just to maybe ask Rama or Rosemary if they'd like to talk a little bit about the comments they made, because they both posted comments on that last bit of conversation. So Rosemary, you said be prepared to go outside your comfort zone, which I thought was a good piece of advice to your 18-year-old self. And also recognize what fires you up, which, you know, as Alan was saying, that's the trickiest thing perhaps for 18-year-olds to do. But the comfort zone, I think, is a concept that would be familiar to 18-year-olds, perhaps more accessible to 18-year-olds. Any thoughts, or do you want to elaborate? If not, that's fine.
Yes. When I was 17 and I left school, I did a year's voluntary service overseas. I do have a strong sense of wanting to bring on people. I've always had that. And I did this year of voluntary service overseas. So on my 18th birthday, I was living in the Solomon Islands in jungle conditions in a leaf hut. There was no electricity. There was no running water. Transport was a dugout canoe. The food I ate was the same every day for almost a year. And I was teaching children from jungle English, to read, basic arithmetic and things. And I didn't realize, I just knew that when I applied for VSO, something just stirred in me. I was going the other side of the world to quite a remote place for a year. And it was a fabulous year, fabulous. But at the end of it, I was ready to come home. And it was a real shock to come home to the noise, to the speed of transport. Remember, there'd been no cars, no roads, not where I was in the jungle. So that year established a lot of values for me.
So stepping out of the comfort zone is really taught you lessons, because I think one of the things that came out of the panel discussion was this was for me, it came out was how, you know, we need to live through experiences to really learn lessons, don't we? There's I don't know if you read books hugely when you were young. I certainly did. I devoured books, but actually you don't really learn from books. You get a certain amount of knowledge from books. You get experiences by proxy. But it's really being thrust into situations which are outside your comfort zone, and I think that came through in what the speakers reported about their experiences. And you may have to be careful what you wish for. I mean, that's one thing you learn. We're full of desires when we're 18 years old, and then we really don't. But we don't understand what on earth those desires mean, or where they lead, or the implications of them. And it's no good our parents or teachers or anyone else telling us either, because we won't listen. Well, we won't listen all that much anyway. Okay. Well, is there anyone else? Chris, you had a question you wanted to put to everyone. Is that right? Or
well, I was thinking of questions. I'd rather just see where the conversation goes. Maybe that would be a wrap-up thing. Just thinking.
Okay.
Rather than tell us we should do something, what should we think?
Well, maybe it'll come into the next question I'm going to put to you all, which is having listened to all the speakers and their own experience of the relationship between values and prosperity, values and money, difficult choices they had to make in their lives and their careers. What's your own personal experience of that relationship between prosperity values in your lives? I mean, you don't have to comment, but if you have a comment and a thought, it would be really interesting to see it. And maybe you could put it in the chat. If we've got a moment, we can ask one of you to say something. If you'd rather just say it, I think maybe we've got enough time to do that. So we can probably do that. But anybody like to reflect a little and then speak? Yeah, Paul.
Yes, I put in the chat about advice for the 18-year-old. Something that happened to me. My uncle said, "Would you join me on a silent retreat at a Jewish monastery weekend?" Okay, Unc, I'll do it, to do him a favor. Well, it was one of the greatest favors that he could, because there was quiet reflection. Imagine a American weekend. If you imagine that, that's what happened. And you reflected, and you start aside all the moving, justifying everything, and you heard this quiet voice within that helped guide. And what I used was, this was a time to reflect on what happened in this last year or so. Where are you now? And what does it look like in the future? But not, to-do lists or things. It was just from a quiet state. Well, we went every year for years, helped guide that first stage of, finishing university and into business. And it was invaluable in keeping great path.
You're breaking up a little bit, Paul, but I think we've got the point you're making. Thank you. That's good. Can you still hear us?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The sound has gone a bit. Don't worry.
Okay.
Okay. No, thanks, Paul. Actually, Joy has made a comment in the chat too that gives us a little bit of an entry point probably into the next question I want to ask everyone. She's raised a really good point, which is that a lot of people have been able to combine their values with prosperity. They've been able to adjust their career, albeit rather bumpily and painfully, maybe in some cases in mid-career. They've turned to something that suits their values more, and they've prospered. So money hasn't necessarily been a big issue, although it's obviously been a factor, but not a too painful a factor. But there are plenty of people who have followed their values and not made it, is Joy's point, which is fair enough. Joy, would you like to elaborate on that a bit, or maybe anyone?
I don't know that I have much more to say, Charles, but it just struck me that we got 3 success stories, which is always lovely. I mean, don't get me wrong. But I don't know, I just realized that not everybody, maybe through education, ability, I don't know what the factors are, privilege maybe, actually are not in a position to make some of these things work. And you know, Nicola, your little strap phrase, it sort of makes me a bit scared, really, because I don't think that is true for everybody. That they do try to do good things and the money doesn't follow. I don't know. That's just my sense. You know, I don't believe that money always follows doing good.
But that's not what was that what the speakers were saying. I'm not sure it was really.
I don't know, Nicola, maybe you can just say the words again. Maybe I've got them wrong. Sorry.
So that is a literal interpretation of the words. I did say do the right thing and the money will follow. But what my boss meant when she gave me that advice is if you do the opposite and you chase the money, then you will not be doing the right thing. And certainly that's the interpretation I took, and knowing her as well as I do, I'm absolutely certain that she meant that. And Joy, I don't have a specific answer, but I wondered if it might be something I could just share a little bit more about. My I mentioned my sister, and she's a charity CEO. She earns a pittance, in my opinion, doing that very, very demanding role. And when I was still at EY, I'll be honest, there was a period of time when I couldn't quite understand. And a couple of times I gave her advice about like how she could get a job like mine. I'm embarrassed now to say that I kind of had that thought and gave that advice, because it was making this massive assumption that for her success was based on the financial security. And so I absolutely agree with you that there's a lot of people that are doing really amazingly good things, and money doesn't always follow. However, I think I've seen, and certainly I've been privileged enough through the work I'm now doing, where I get to see a vast array of people. I've been able to see that actually that isn't the driver for a lot of people. A lot of people who are genuinely choosing to work in charities to do those things, their view of success has absolutely no financial value to it. And I hugely admire those people, I have to say.
Charles, may I just say, can you hear?
Yeah, we can try again.
For the book, Principles to Profit, which you fully with follow the principles and the profit.
You're a bit garbled, but I think we probably picked up the quote, which we can probably find. Yeah. Sorry, Paul. Put it in the, if you put it in the chat, that'd be brilliant.
Their work and internet improvement our neighborhood.
It's no good. It's sort of on and off. Sorry, Alan, you were putting up your hand.
Yeah, I wanted to support what Joy was raising, not in general terms, but it reminded me of a specific situation. So I started a new job in a business that was losing a lot of money. And as part of the negotiation for the remuneration package, I suggested that there should be a bonus, which was a percentage of the reduction in the loss that I was able to achieve. And so we shook hands on this, as loosely as that, a percentage of the reduction in the loss. And then a year later, when I raised it at my performance review, my boss told me that it would, because we managed to reduce the loss by £1 million. And he told me that whatever percentage it would be too much to be signed off by his boss. And so he wasn't able to do anything. So that was certainly a case where I believed I'd done the right thing and zero money followed. I rationalized it though by saying that nobody could take away the achievement.
Anyone else before we move on, and just we've got a couple more things. Well, one main question we want to put again, and that is, this is to everyone, including the speakers. You know, we've had a good discussion about the relationship, that rather nuanced and quite complex relationship between values and prosperity, or values and money, if you like, which sort of ignores John's very valid interpretation of what prosperity is. I mean, I agree with you. Prosperity can be expressed absolutely not in terms of money or material things, as can wealth. We can talk about our personal wealth as being, you know, non-tangible. But if we just talk about the relationship between values and money and the discussion we've had, is there anything that actually has hit home and encourage you to think differently, to change what you might otherwise do in any way as a result of a discussion, or a result maybe of just thinking about the topic a bit more? Because I mean, it's not an unusual topic to think about, I agree, but we don't sort of delve into this all that much, really. Even I can't even remember the UK Values Alliance quite addressing this over the last 12 years. Maybe we did, but so what are you encouraged to do differently as a result of the discussion we've just had? Any thoughts? I mean, put them in the chat.
I was going to say about the future, because clearly we've shared our experiences this afternoon, but the key one for me is, you know, how you can equip the next generation and generations to resist the commercial pressures. I mean, there's already a recruitment crisis in the police, in the prison service, in nursing, doctors to a lesser extent. And, you know, in my coaching practice, I've coached some social workers, I've coached teachers, I've done a whole range of public sectors, and I am so struck by how they put their values into practice every day. But I fear with the growing commercial pressures, and John alluded to this when he said, well, you know, with all the commercial pressures of today, I'm not sure that I could have done it as I did it, but I was able to at the time. So for me, where I'm left thinking about is what contribution I can make, perhaps all of us can make, to the next generation to see past this in an environment where I think the commercial pressures are increasing, and I think are likely to increase going forward. So that would be my question. I don't have a resolution to that, but it's the area where I'm thinking about based on participating this afternoon.
Are you thinking it's actually more difficult then for young people, and maybe all people now, because of economic circumstances, financial pressures? Do you think it's more difficult for them to live their values than it has been in the past? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that's right, because you're getting to, because of the level of connectivity, you're getting to a situation where you've got a ubiquity about what people want and how they're supposed to live their lives. You know, living in the same type of houses and same sort of cars, and so I think that is a challenge going forward, and it's how you present a different type of living that can catch the imagination, as it did in the past. That fueled the teachers and police and, you know, social workers and medics to do what they wanted to do. So I do think it's relatively more difficult. I don't know what other people think, if they agree with that.
Well, shall we pick that up rather than, and then if people got different points, we'll take those.
Sure.
Yeah, reactions to Rosemary. Reactions to Neil's point.
Well, if I was the 18-year-old today, looking at the cost of the debt that I would be incurring if I went to university, looking at the cost of houses, looking at how long I would have to work before the pension kicks in, my decisions about how I kind of construct my life would be very, very much influenced by those financial factors.
And Chris, you were putting your hand up.
And I would say, I think I more or less have it all, and my kids have by and large assume that they won't, and they approach life differently. They don't have the same aims and objectives that I do, and they're, I think, more secure in a way in some of their choices and trade-offs, and they're mostly living their values, I think, probably more closely aligned than I did. I was just like, the corporate, treadmill slave. I did do the right thing, but, I gave and gave and gave. So it's a change. I think unfortunately or fortunately, their expectations have changed, at least some.
So you're saying that actually, just to follow up on Chris before getting back to you, Nicola, you're saying that actually, as a result of perhaps not as a result of financial pressures, but your children are actually more inclined to live their values, or more secure in doing so than you were. So
certainly at that age, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, which is not quite what Neil was saying. He was saying something that it's going to be more difficult.
But I was able to give my kids everything, so
Okay. Paul, sorry, before Nicola, because you've been raising your hand for a little while. We can hear you. Yeah.
And a guest lecturer at school, and one of the things that come up with times is, with all the greed and corruption in big business, I don't want to go there. I want to start my own business. And a number of them said that, and that was what prompted me to try and give them good examples of running business to value. I was interviewing spirit business people telling the story. It does work. To across.
I think we missed the first bit of it, but I think what Paul was saying when he was teaching a course at business school, at Regent's University, I would guess, on values in business, that was the reactions he was getting from the students. Yeah. Okay.
I was going to make a similar point, Charles.
Yeah.
I was going to, so one of the beautifully surprising things about the types of business I work, and I appreciate that these people are choosing to work at purpose-driven businesses, but the younger generations who work there feel very passionate about their purpose. They feel very aligned to their values, to the extent that they are quite brutally holding leaders to account when they believe there's a misalignment with the organizational purpose, or they feel that there's a misalignment with the values. That gives me huge amounts of hope, and I appreciate that. As I say, that's not everyone, but I sometimes wonder whether maybe social media is kind of like overhyping this as an issue, and the reality is we'll have just as much of a blend in this generation as we had in our generations, that you'll have some people that very much are living for that financial gain, and you'll have some people that will do and will find ways to live a different life.
Mm. Okay, even though it may be more of a battle to get the prosperity side of the equation, which undoubtedly it is. I think but
also prosperity, like maybe there'll be a recalibration of what prosperity means.
Along the lines of what John was saying, right?
To that point, but also even like, how big a house does someone need to live in? I think our younger generations are starting to be more realistic around you know, my daughter talks regularly to me about the fact that she's only 13, but she talks regularly to me about like, well, you two would move out of this house. We'd never, you two would never need a house this big. That would be, you know, think of how many people could live in a house this size if I wasn't living here. I mean, I love the fact that she's very clear it's once she's gone, but she has this kind of slightly recalibration of whereas I think the boomers and probably my generation were much more, you're trying to get scale up and scale up and scale up, but I don't think that, certainly her and her friends don't seem to think in that same way.
Yeah, so maybe we had to experience these you know, rather crucial moments in our lives. Maybe they won't have to do it. You know, we went on. I mean, the thing that struck me was the, you know, Shailene's cup of coffee moment, John's two dead bodies moment. You know, suddenly your whole sort of arc of your life seems, wow, you know, gosh. It suddenly brought home to you that you've just gone in the wrong direction. And I think we've all had those sort of moments, haven't we, really? It's learning, what you might call, with benefit of hindsight, learning moments, what feel at the time like extremely painful moments. But you suddenly see, you know, the veil drops from your eyes, you suddenly see that, well, in both those cases, maybe you haven't been living in the right way, or haven't been living the values, or just in the wrong environment for your values. Any other thoughts, Shailene? Yeah.
Yeah, I think this be with what's just been shared, I think this would be a good point to share the final story that I wanted to share. Again, it's coffee related, and some of you may have heard this one, but I find it very relevant to what we've been discussing. And yeah, you may have heard this one before. So at a college reunion, a group of successful alumni, now doctors, lawyers, business owners, decided to visit their old professor. They chatted about their careers and their families, but soon the conversation shifted to life's pressures, stress, and constant chasing after more. After listening for a while, the professor smiled and he said, "Hold on a minute, I'll go make some coffee." He came back with a large pot and a tray full of cups, none of them matching. Some were fine porcelain, others were plain ceramic, a few were chipped glass mugs, and one even looked like it came from a diner. As everyone reached for a cup, the professor watched in silence. Once they all had coffee in their hand, he said, "Notice what just happened. Most of you instantly reach for the nicest cups, leaving behind the simpler ones. It's normal to want the best for ourselves, but that's often where the stress begins." He gestured towards the cups. "The cup doesn't make the coffee taste any better. What you really want is the coffee, but you've still focused on the cups." Then he paused. "Life is the coffee. Your job, your house, your income, your status, those are just cups. They help contain life, but they don't define it. And the trouble is, the more we focus on the cup, the more we miss out on the coffee." He smiled and he said, "Remember, happy people don't always have the best of everything, but they know how to make the best of everything they have."
Mm-hmm.
That's very nice. Thank you so much, Shailene. That's great. I think we won't necessarily end on that, but it's a nice story to have at the end of this discussion, really. And we are near the end, so it's very appropriate. But just to make sure that everyone's had a chance to talk, Sue and Joya, you both, I wasn't sure if you wanted to contribute. Sue, you said something in the chat.
Yeah, I'm doing some work at the moment with the NHS. And it's got an element of values based to it. But my interest is really when people align to their own values, they tend not to be so ill. So, you know, in terms of reducing stress or reducing need for medication or whatever, there is something about taking the self-care of values, you know, how values actually relate to our body, basically. And taking care of ourselves and talking about our new generations or whatever. I think aligning to that, there's a big focus on self-care. I do a lot of work in the charity sector, and I see huge amounts of burnout because almost there's an over-caring. So there's an element of boundary needed, boundary setting, and what's right. And I've also done a lot of work with whistleblowers where they've done the right thing and really been punished for it. So I have a mixed sort of arrangement, if you like, with values and prosperity. And I think prosperity, you know, my father died a very, very, very financially wealthy man and very, very ill man, ill with many different things. So I've seen firsthand actually that health is the biggest level of prosperity that we can have. So anything that can support that, I think, is probably most useful. And I think our younger generations are really a lot more caring and open and entrepreneurial, actually, towards that element than maybe my generation. So, yeah.
No, thank you very much. That's a really good point, I think. It's quite complex and nuanced, isn't it? That relationship between values and prosperity. That's what we're really all saying. Joy, did you want to say anything, or was that no? That's fine. Anyone else want to just have a final word before we wrap everything up? And
yeah, it's okay. I mean, I just think we need to look after ourselves, you know, from the inside as well as the outside, because that's where our values are coming from. And if we don't spend a bit of time reflecting and spending time in silence and things like that and nurturing ourselves inside, then we won't have much to give on the outside, because it all starts inside, doesn't it, really? It starts inside your mind, starts inside your heart. And having some sort of higher perspective and believing in the innate goodness of us all is very important. And you know, young people, if they were encouraged more in that direction, rather than being, you know, forced through an education system which fails a lot of people, and if there was more emphasis on the inner work, you know, including all these values, which is, you know, what the UK Values Alliance is all about, isn't it? Those values, and they're not coming out of thin air. They're not just something in the head. They're, you know, they're driven by an inner force or an inner spirit or whatever else you want to call it, an inner energy. And that needs looking after and nurturing and growing so that we can carry on a revolution, because we're part of a counter-revolution, I would say, and we're in a transition where the good will win in the end. Like all the fairy stories, and that the good wins out, and we will, even though the forces opposing us seem to be almost impossible to overcome. But
I think that really is a good note to end on. So thank you, John. It's not a fairy story; it's values. To paraphrase rather recklessly what you just said.
So, in other words, Charles, they all lived happily ever after.
Yes. I guess that's right. Good.
That's a very good place to start. To stop.
To stop and to begin again. Thank you, everyone, very much. And it was wonderful. Thank you in particular, John and Nicola and Shailene, for talking to us and being so generous in sharing, you know, what's happened to you in your lives.